Good afternoon. Welcome. Farm Kenya starts right now. My name is Peter Wakaba, and welcome to today's episode that is packed with information in the agriculture space from here in Kenya and from across the regional divide and right across the world. Now, today we have a special focus, and in a country where food security is a pressing concern, particularly in arid and semi-arid lands, technology is proving to be a game changer in many different ways. Now, today, we delve into how innovative solutions are transforming these regions, ensuring resilience for farmers and sustainability for the future. We're joined by two experts. They are from USAID. We have Margaret Kahiga, who is the Chief of Party for the Nawiri Project. Now, she is the Chief of Party of the Nawiri Project, a resilience and food security program aimed at reducing acute malnutrition in Kenya's arid and semi-arid lands and regions. Now, she joined CRS in 2016 as Deputy Chief of Party for Nawiri, starting in December 2019, and in April 2024, she was appointed to her current role as Chief of Party. Now, we also have Jennifer Mora. She is the Resilience Coordinator, overseeing the management and coordination of resilience portfolios across Kenya and East Africa. She brings 25 years of experience with the U.S. government managing policy, market systems, agriculture, livestock, and resilience programs. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think a good place to start would be to sort of take stock of the situation against the background of a report that was put out by the UNDP looking at the challenges that people who live in what they call the borderlands, part of this region and across various parts of the world, but more so in arid and semi-arid lands, the unique challenges that they face, meaning that this impact them in terms of their livelihoods, they impact them in terms of bringing up their children, in terms of nutrition, a whole lot of challenges that are found nowhere else. Maybe we can crystallize that. Let's start off with you, Margaret.
Most of our ASALS regions, like you have said, are areas that we can say that are challenged in terms of when it comes to different opportunities for livelihoods. And traditionally, in most of our arid areas, you find that they have traditionally been pastoralists.
Yes.
But over the years, also looking at the different the changes that have happened, and especially with the climate change. In the last few years, like in Kenya, just giving an example of northern Kenya, like from 2021 up to early 2023, we had actually 5 consecutive failed rainy seasons, and this really did affect the communities in those areas. And immediately after that, coming from one extreme of drought, we went again to flooding, especially in some of those areas. So it sometimes it's always like from one extreme to the other. And this does have a lot of effect in terms of their livelihoods and also in terms of their health, and especially for the most vulnerable, who are in this case are children. You find that a lot of times the malnutrition levels in a lot of those areas are very, very high compared to the other areas in Kenya.
Let's come to you, Ms. Moran, and the challenge here is that we've talked about resilience. What is the opposite of that? What are the things that are making these people not resilient, so to say?
Well, thank you, Peter, for having us on the show today at Farm Kenya. It's great to be able to talk about the U.S. government's U.S. Agency for International Development programs that we have in Kenya, where we're partnering with both the communities and other Kenya institutions to address some of the challenges that are impacting the lives of Kenyans in the arid and border areas, such as climate change, as Margaret's talked about, the lack of food availability in time, it's impacting malnutrition issues for the children, conflict, and then obviously migration. How population is moving from rural to urban centers, the different use of land and the land availability, and how that's impacting the context, especially for traditional historic pastoralism, which was very much based on mobility, and then how that's changing and adapting in the current context of these challenges is some of the programs and partnerships we've been able to work with Kenyans.
I'd like to break down what you've said so that we look at each of those challenges. And I think for me the biggest that you've pointed out, apart of course from climate change, which is talked about, is the creation of the modern nation state, and the fact that some of these communities would have some sort of resilience by ranging around, following the rains. Like we talk about the wild-beast migration. People used to travel across regions following the rains with their livestock and those sorts of things. But now with the borders, it's not as easy as before. How do you think this is impacting those communities?
Well, I think the communities, their livelihoods are changing, and I think they're being able to adapt through partnerships, collaboration with private sector entrepreneurs, to really adapt their livelihoods and have livelihood diversification, such as we're seeing agropastoralism, where modern technologies, such as water-saving irrigation schemes, are coming up in various parts of the arid lands in Kenya. And so they're adjusting their livelihoods so that they are better positioned to adapt and mitigate those impacts of these significant shocks they're facing, whether it's from the climatic or the recent disease outbreak, the pandemic. That truly does impact their livelihood. So through adaptation and livelihood diversification, I think we're seeing the borderland people, the people in the arid regions of Kenya, adapting new technologies to address some of their livelihood challenges. And one of the solutions we're seeing through partnerships with private sector is many new technologies and businesses and entrepreneurs are really developing new businesses and opportunities in the arid lands.
I want to take you back, and I'm trying to paint a picture because lots of people normalize the challenges that we've talked about for these communities, because that's the way it has always been. Excuse me. So that you have administrators, you have policymakers, you have people who are stakeholders in this equation, and they then would be able to do things about it, but because they have interacted, they have known these people to be like this all along, then they then think it's a matter of just education, for example. One size fits all solution, like like in one case we've seen people being told to move from flood prone areas, that sort of thing. What then do we need to look at so that we can then start to say that we are having a broad-based conversation that encapsulates the challenges that we are talking about? Then think about livelihoods, think about culture, so that we can then start to even think of solutions that will work and be acceptable to these people in the context of the lives that they have always lived, and knowing that these are communities and sometimes are stuck in the ways that they work.
Maybe I could jump in on that. And I think when I look at some time back, yes, people would have been stuck in their ways. But I think also with the different circumstances, also people are beginning, like Jennifer has said, to adapt and really look at, even come up with their own solutions in terms of what do we need to do differently. And what else, and even also getting collaboration both from the government, from also other actors, to see how do we support the communities to be able to adapt to those changes. We also have a very vibrant youth population, which also has a different way of thinking in terms of looking at different opportunities and not just looking at the traditional pastoralism. And you will find that in a lot of areas where people are taking up different ways, all diversifying their livelihoods, especially agropastoralism. A lot of this is actually being led also by the youth, because they are more maybe willing to risk and also more open to changes, and being able to do something different, because also they have seen sometimes some of these there are very many challenges in terms of the way people have been doing things, and they are looking at how do we actually adapt and do things a little bit more differently. And what I think and what has been happening in most of these communities, when they get the right support, both from the government, also from the other actors, then they are actually able to adapt and be able to do things, to diversify their livelihoods and take care of their families.
So paint for us a picture. You talked about agropastoralism. How is that different from the traditional pastoralism which they have lived for so long?
The traditional pastoralism is where you are moving from one place to the other.
So nomadic pastoralism.
The nomadic pastoralism, where you will be, and for this to be effective, you actually have to have a lot of spaces through where you are able to move. Maybe during the dry period, you are able to move to an area that you have grazing areas that you can actually be able to take your livestock. And during these other times, you can actually be able to bring back your livestock. But currently what we are seeing more of is a mix of a bit of that movement, but also with more sedentary living, and also looking at other opportunities, like also mixed farming, being able to grow some crops, be it for your own consumption or also be it for sale.
One of the aspects that was glaring in the traditional aspect was that when people moved, often the women and very young children would get left behind. And because they depended mostly on livestock, then your source of livelihood has moved away and you'd be facing the short end of the stick. Do you think this new equation has made it better for them?
Yes, this has definitely, because this makes it easier for them to be able to maintain their families and to at least ensure for the ones who are remaining behind, for the women, the children who are there, when they have a source of livelihood, they can still be able to probably earn some money from that. But also, more importantly, they have something to eat. And this really helps in ensuring that the children remain healthy.
Yeah. We talked about technology, Jennifer, and how it's helping. Give us a sort of broad-based view of the various ways that technology is being brought to bear so that it can start to address some of the challenges that we have talked about.
Yeah, I'll give two examples. One is through the private sector. USAID, in partnership with various private sector actors, have been able to bring technology into some of the development programming to address water security, accountability, and ensure access for communities. In Marsabit County, for example, where they use the prepaid water meter as a way to ensure effective and efficient use of their water and availability in a timely payment fashion. And they're generating revenue, creating jobs for the most vulnerable in the community that are hired through the management of the water kiosks, and ensuring that there's more water available for multiple purpose use, both domestic use for human consumption as well as for livelihood production, whether it's through the agropastoralism, crop production, and livestock, to ensure more prosperous lives for their community members in that area. Another way is through partnerships through innovation and technology. The U.S. government, through the Feed the Future initiative, which is a global hunger initiative, partners with U.S. universities and universities here in Kenya to work with young scientists to bring innovation and test and adapt to the local culture, the local context, environmental, as well as productive, to bring these technologies to bear. And last week we were in Isiolo with one of Margaret's sites, and we were hosted by some of the students from the Agriculture and Technology University here in Kenya, where they were showing water-saving irrigation schemes. And we were with the technical department in Isiolo County's agriculture extension staff, and we were talking about ways how that technology can be available in Isiolo, and ways for it can be continued to be trained and accessed for all community members to be able to utilize it to increase production and have nutritious food available at the household level, and as Margaret said, also available to sell for income generation as well.
And these projects are just but a drop in the ocean. How do we make them more broad-based and more sustainable, such that if we come 10, 15, 20 years later, we'll find that whatever USAID was able to do has expanded. Maybe the community has been able to really take hold of that and multiply 10, 15 times because of the revenue aspect. How do we build in this sustainability?
Yes, it's USAID, the International Agency for International Development. We have an approach with locally led development. We feel it's very strongly important that we have locally led development with the communities, as well as private sector and county governments and other institutions in Kenya, to really identify the solutions and work together on a sustainable pathways. And so through working with local universities, those technologies and skills are with young scientists who will be the future of Kenya, scientists, as well as with the private sector actors who are working to grow their businesses, create jobs, and expand their market opportunities here in Kenya and in the region. So we think through partnerships is one of the keys to sustainability of these initiatives here in Kenya.
Margaret, I want to bring you in on the same thing. We've seen in the past boreholes that have been drilled by NGOs, water kiosks that have been put up, that sort of thing. Abandoned or broken down years later. We've seen water points become sources of conflict and that sort of thing. How do we ensure that communities that you work with are first able to appreciate that these benefits can then be shared across the community, and even be able to work with partners to expand those benefits so that the sustainability is built in?
From the beginning, even when we are doing the design of these projects, we do work with the communities. We work with them right from the beginning because it's not our project.
Yes.
This is their project, and they have to be in the lead of all these projects. It also has to come from them. It's not for us to come and say you need this, but it should actually be something, a felt need from the community. And we work very closely also with the county governments. And a lot of times we co-invest together with the county government. Maybe just to give an example, like one of the sites where Jennifer has mentioned, the drilling of the water project was actually done by the county government. So they come in, they put in the funds for the drilling, we do the equipping. And we do the extension.
Yes.
And we also have other partners. We have also the Ministry of Agriculture. They are the ones who are training the farmers. And they are the ones also supplying these certified seeds and the drought-resistant seeds that are actually being planted there. And they're the ones also working with those communities. So it's actually a joint effort between the community, the partners who are there, and also the government. And in a lot of cases, and especially when it comes to water, we know water is a very key resource in the arid areas.
Yes.
And there are a lot of other, especially for the livestock that is moving.
Yes.
There has to be a way of how will people actually share out this resource.
The water points.
The water points. And this is one of the things that they also put in place to make sure that even for the neighboring communities who might not necessarily have water, or even for the animals that might be just on the migratory route, that they're actually able to still be able to access that water, and they agree on this is the much that probably they need to pay for that. So it actually has to be a participatory process, otherwise it will fail. And as part of also ensuring that there is also sustainability, as we work with them, we are also doing a lot of trainings in terms of how do they govern, the governance aspects of all this. So that they can actually be able to maintain, looking at issues to do with operations and maintenance. That actually has to be there.
Okay. Yeah, we've talked about this project quite a bit, and increased water access in Isiolo's in Garimara ward that borders Samburu and Meru counties has been hailed as promoting the diversification of livelihoods and peaceful coexistence between local communities and their neighbors. Now, a water supply project that has been supported by USAID in collaboration with the Isiolo County Government and the Catholic Church, among other partners, saw the sinking of several boreholes. Now, according to the USAID Mission Director in Kenya, David Gosney, the project sought to improve water access to enhance agricultural productivity and support livelihoods, and has seen malnutrition rates in the country drop to 12 from 15%. Let's take a look at that story.
Like other parts of the county, Garimara and Atan are prone to perennial drought, which threatens pastoralism, the region's main economic stay, and results in massive loss of livestock, impoverishing and rendering the local communities food insecure, which puts children aged below 5 years at risk of being malnourished.
And without the water, there's no ability to maintain their cattle, their goats, their camels. They also weren't able to plant crops and provide health and nutrition and food for their family. They also weren't able to conserve this landscape and deal with the wildlife in ways that conserves wildlife but also protects the important resources of the communities here. And all those results were delivered through that partnership between the American people, the Kenyan people, the leaders of this community, the leaders of the county here in Isiolo, working together with a common vision to deliver those resources so that these people could live safe, dignified, prosperous lives.
And also making sure that they diversify their livelihoods, not just from pastoralism, but also being able to grow nutritious foods. We have seen here in Aro some of those examples where they have been able to grow different varieties of beans, green grams, and also being able to grow things like sweet potatoes.
A community that has for long borne the brunt of climate change is slowly building its resilience and acclimatizing to the global crisis thanks to improved water access. At Aro village, for instance, local Turkana women are undertaking irrigated farming on a 2-acre land using water from a local borehole.
Kama saa hii mifugo inakula karibu, maji tunachota ya binadamu karibu. Saa hiyo masaa ingine tunaenda kulima kidogo hapo kwa sababu maji iko mingi kidogo. Inatosha mifugo, inatosha watu na manyumbani. Hasa tunatumia hiyo nyingine kwa kulima.
Meanwhile, the kitchen gardens, predominantly established by women, have significantly bolstered food security for families.
Unatumia chini ya dakika 20 kwa saizi kushota maji. Maji iko mingi nyumbani, usafi saizi iko juu, magonjwa imepungua. Mifugo ziko nyumbani throughout kwa sababu zinapata maji karibu, haziendi sasa mbali, ziko karibu, watoto wanapata maziwa.
The Deputy Governor, James Lowassa, who also doubles as the county health executive, said sanitation and hygiene had improved in the area due to access to clean water.
When we came in 2022, the global acute malnutrition rate was at 17.4%. By 2023, it had reduced to 15.4%. And the recent study that was done in May 2024, it had reduced to 13.1%.
The money they earn from selling the produce goes to paying school fees. The women no longer solely rely on their husbands for money they can save for unexpected needs.
Sababu wazee hawaendi mbali, maisha pia kwa nyumbani si mbaya. Unajua mbeleni walikuwa wanaenda hata 6 months kabla hajarudi nyumbani. Ajui watoto hata wanakula nini. Sasa ni mama peke yake ndo anabaki struggle na watoto tu hapo hivyo nyumbani.
The increasing number of residents taking up farming in the area has also seen some of the young men or Morans quit cattle rustling and embrace the venture.
Hapo jadi sisi hatukuwa tunajua kulima, tulikuwa tunajua mambo ya mifugo peke yake. Lakini sasa tunaweza lima maharagwe, kutumia pia maji ya mvua. Wakati wa ukame tunakuwa na shamba boy hapo kidogo. Tunalima tusukuma, tukaletewa mbegu. Tuliweza kupanda mbegu kama maharagwe, mahindi, dengu, kunde, na pia tukaintroduciwa kitu kama sukuma na spinach. Hiyo ndo tuliweza kukuza na ilisaidia sana watoto wetu.
Apart from enhancing access to nutritious foods and averting hunger, the projects have enabled the residents to live dignified lives. For KTN News, I'm Paul Thiongo.
Really interesting story right there by our very own Paul Thiongo, dedicated chap right there. Now, off the back of that story right there, we then of course want to throw the question about culture change, because this, as you have seen, is one of the main challenges that those communities are facing. They have been doing one thing for years, for generations, for centuries, ladies. We call it team building with your livestock. So you march around with your cattle for a year, fatten them up, try to sell them off, without really bothering about the market. You sell them when you need school fees, that sort of thing. The market might be in a glut, it might be in a drought situation, so it's really chaotic. How then do we get these communities to start to transition, one, to treat their livestock business as a business, because it is, and that's of course create a market system around it, and then secondly start to actually believe that it shouldn't be just about cows. You can do a bit of crop farming. You can even transition to other animals. How do we get there, Margaret? Or maybe you're already walking the journey.
Yes, yeah, this is something that I can say it already that we are working on. Of course, for there to be change, there has to be social behavior change. People have to really think differently in terms of how they do things, and this is part of what we have been working with communities on. And increasingly we have seen a lot, some changes in that.
Yes.
One, in terms of even the kind of animals that people keep, and this could be influenced more even by the fact that the climate change.
Yes.
Because in the last in the last drought, they lost about 70%. It's estimated about 70% of their livestock.
And that is cows and goats.
Mostly cows. And yes, and goats.
They kept telling us, sorry to interrupt you,
yes,
that camels can withstand at least 3 rainless seasons.
Yes.
But cows will be gone in just one.
Yes, and cows are not as handy as compared to either goats or even to camels.
Yes.
And you find a lot of farmers now pivoting more to keeping goats and also camels. But it's also good to note that camels are not cheap.
Yes.
And a lot of the community members may not necessarily be able to afford a camel. And a lot of the more vulnerable populations that we are working with will not be able to probably afford a camel unless maybe there is particular support for them to be able to do that.
Yes.
And in a lot of cases, they go to keeping goats. Goats are quite handy. And we saw that immediately when it started raining and there was a bit of pasture, you can see the difference. If you went to any of the northern counties last year around this time,
Yes.
and now you go now, it's
There's a
totally
huge
different.
difference.
There's a huge difference, even in terms of animal population.
Yes.
Because the goats reproduce
Multiply
very fast. And that's a good thing. And this is one of the animals that I would say that also is helping them in terms of maintaining their livelihoods.
Yes.
At the same time, things like chicken, poultry keeping,
Yes.
is not something that traditionally you'll find with the pastoralist communities. But slowly by slowly, you can actually see these being adapted much more, and people actually keeping poultry either for income generation, for sale of eggs, or even for their own consumption, so that at least they have more nutritious food. So we're also doing a lot of social behavior change and a lot of health education, trying to promote also consumption of things like eggs, especially for children, because also these are very nutritious when it comes to, especially for the malnourished children.
Yes.
And also when it comes also to the farming aspect, we have also seen communities that had never in their life planted anything or even grown anything.
Yes.
Within 1 or 2 years, there's a very big difference. And I can just give you an example. That village that you have seen in that story, a raw village, before early 2023, they had not grown anything there. But once there was a bit of availability of a little water and also a lot of support in terms of training and a lot of working with them in terms of what can be grown, within one season, they were able to harvest about 1.6 tons of the orange-fleshed sweet potatoes. These are very nutritious.
But are they eating them?
Yes, they are eating them.
Sometimes,
They are eating them. But it was also a source of income for them.
Yes.
They were also able to produce, I think, also about 1.6 tons of beans. This is something they had, and different varieties.
Yes.
They also had green grams. They had cowpeas. In one of the other villages, they were able to produce 4.5 tons of beans in a very small space. So there is a lot of there is willingness to change, and again also if it's making economic sense, because a lot of them, they are also seeing this is actually an alternative livelihood. When we were in a role, one of the women there actually mentioned, apart from what they have done there, she has actually been able to go to another place and lease land, and she's actually planting beans for sale.
Okay.
So if it makes sense economically, people will adapt to it.
Okay. And I want to bring you in, Jennifer, and I want us to now go to market linkages as a source of resilience, because we've talked about all the production that is then going on. How then do we work to integrate these people into mainstream, not just local, but regional and global markets, especially knowing that once we've gotten this kind of farmer to transition away from just the traditional aspects of consumption, meat, milk, those sorts of things, they are now exposed to a global economy. They might start eating the staples that we normally see people eat, unga and those sorts of things. These are global, affected by global systems. How do you get this farmer to be productive in that space and to be able to actually make sense for that market in terms of making money, buying and selling?
Yeah, well, Peter and Mark, you guys have put on, I think, one of those critical points. It's the commercialization and understanding how that's going to work as a market system, a system. And as we're seeing through trainings, as Margaret has said, through developing and training systems that allow for access to finance, credit availability, extension services, learning about savings and reinvesting in a business and thinking about it truly as a business has been one of the ways I think we're seeing change and adaptation. And then I think the other aspect of it's been how can you link market actors? There's the producers, there's the traders, there's the consumer, and how do you make sure that the system across all those actors are working? Perfect example, again, is one of the markets that we had a chance to visit. The market network there, a strong organization. They have a SACU that they've developed over the last year or two, and they're now buying and accessing not only from Meru, Busia, Tanzania, and Uganda, some of the vegetables and produce that they're selling in their market in the county. And then they're also ensuring one of the most important aspects of it, making food availability not only in urban and rural, but also the last mile. The communities like Garbatula, Murte, and Las Mesas, and making sure that food's available for that last mile population. And so I think it truly is one of the issues is how do we connect the market system actors and know that there's opportunities, and then where to take advantage of those opportunities in these areas. And we're very pleased to be partnering with Isiolo and other counties in northern Kenya with their trade and market and cooperatives department. Really bringing in this market development and cooperative development to aggregate the producer side of it, as well as link to the market actors. And so we think that's another coping strategy is part of that, being part of that system. And the thinking, as you said, when you asked the question, is about commercialization. Yes. Thinking of it as a business and a profit.
One of the earlier projects, I think this was a drive with the World Bank and USAID, had thought about getting these pastoralists to agree to reduce the number of livestock that they have, so that then insurance can come in, and then also be able to create market linkages that then enables them access not just local livestock markets, but foreign markets. How would you knit this project then together with something like that then enables the offtake of this when the livestock is ripe for the market, not just when there's crisis?
Yeah, I think one of the key things through cooperative development that USAID and other actors have been supporting, we're aggregating and increasing the quality of the animal and at the time of sale, and through behavioral change, ensuring that animals are a business and they're sold at a timely fashion when they're ready, and then also linking with market actors, not only here in Nairobi, as well as externally in the Middle East and other countries, and producing for that market. Yes. You have to produce for the consumer, and so if the consumer wants such a kg type animal, we need to be able to produce for that. So working through aggregation and the county governments and other actors, helping the producers understand that and making sure that then they have the skills and the resources to take those actions toward producing for the market.
Ladies, I want us to talk about the gender aspect, and then of course the technology and how that creates different roles along the value chain for young people. I want to start off with you, Margaret. And the fact of the matter is that this transformation in not just the livelihoods but the entire farming ecosystem for these communities is very empowering to women. Talk to us about how that works and what that looks like.
Yeah. Traditionally, if you look at the traditional pastoralism, a lot of times the women did not have as much space as the men in terms of even what they are able to own.
Yes.
And even currently in a lot of the families, you'll find that for the bigger herds like camels, the cattle, they'll always be owned by the men. The women might own a few goats here and there, but with this diversification and the agropastoralism, the women actually are finding more space and are getting more empowered, because a lot of the people we are working with in terms of these farming activities, you'll find that it's mostly women. And this is also because a lot of times they're the ones who are also left behind, like especially when the men have gone herding. So this is actually a space for them.
Yes.
And again, also when we are looking at issues to do with water and even developing these water systems,
yes,
there is a lot of participation by women, and part of that reason is because traditionally it's the women who will go look for water, and when they find these other things that they can actually do with this water, the productive aspect of water, by making it more productive for them to be able to grow other things, this is very, very empowering for them, and they're actually able to be able to earn something from these farming activities.
And the provision of water alone means that they no longer have to spend half the day walking long distances to that sort of thing. So this is the time they're putting into the farming then.
Exactly. Now they have more time to actually be more productive, because these other time is just the walking time, and of course also by the time they walk maybe for 7-10 kilometers, when you come back you actually really can't be very productive. You'll be very tired to be able to do anything else. But here where you can actually be able to have water near your home, and at the same time you can also be able to get access to water that you can actually be able to produce something near where you live. That's very empowering.
Jennifer, there are those who would say that all these changes then are disenfranchising and disempowering men. But from where we sit, this broad-based change is benefiting everybody. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think from a household income standpoint, when you have multiple adult members, both men and women, being able to produce an income that can coexist in the family to be used for access to paying school fees, accessing food, and also growing that household income so that they can prosper and have livelihood opportunities, I think is a positive. And so we're seeing both men and women embracing some of the value addition, whether it's the agriculture, where they're producing additional crops, or we're seeing value addition and even diversifying into other non-traditional commodities such as poultry, or value addition type efforts as it relates to the livestock sector itself. And women have roles to play in those. And so we're seeing ability for both men and women to see their household prosper. And I think that's what is positive situation through the adaptations that are happening with technology and innovation. And also the importance of, as I said, the access to essential services. Being able to pay school fees and have food at the household level is one of the most joyful things a family can have, whether you're in the borderlands of Kenya or here in a rural or urban setting. And so those two things are wonderful for at the family setting to bring peace and cohesion at the household level, but also in a larger community where everyone can benefit from the opportunities that the diversifications are bringing.
Margaret, people with choices, and they have different food to tap, they have different economic activities, can then bring up healthier populations. You talked about children and the reduction in incidences of malnutrition. Talk to us about the broad-based impact this has on society as a whole in terms of human development, in terms of how they learn, how they grow, and that sort of thing. What sort of impacts have you been seeing?
It's very critical for us to have a healthy population, and you cannot actually have a healthy population if a child is malnourished. And from the research, it shows that if a child is malnourished, especially when younger, of course also that affects their cognitive development, which means that also this can lead to some problems with their development and their learning later in life. So for us to actually be able to have a healthy population, and a population that will be very productive in future, it's really important for us to invest in the health of the children. And we have had problems, especially in the north, where we have had over the years a lot of very high malnutrition levels, especially when it comes to acute malnutrition. And this is one of the reasons why for Nawiri we are investing a lot in trying to address the various drivers of this acute malnutrition to ensure that we can actually be able to work with communities, with the government, to make sure that we sustainably reduce those levels. In some of the villages, you could find that even up to 40%, 30% of the children are malnourished. And that is way very high. It's totally unacceptable. Actually, we should not be having any malnutrition rates even beyond even 10% is pretty high. And if you compare that with some other areas in Kenya, we find that the northern region has been disadvantaged when it comes to that. And that's why we are investing a lot and working together with the government and the communities to ensure that we can actually be able to reduce these levels of malnutrition in these areas.
Okay. Jennifer, I want us to talk about technology now and the impact that can have. And a very simple one, the fact that we have M-Pesa and these women now have access to some sort of banking mechanisms has given them complete financial freedom. Talk to us about that and its impact.
M-Pesa is a powerful tool of innovation here in Kenya. With USAID, through the programming with the livestock market systems activity that was a part of the Feed the Future initiative, the program we've been able to partner in the context of Old Dinero. And it was an area that years ago did not have connectivity. And so far, the Safaricom came in and put in a tower, brought access to the mobile phone, brought access to mobile money, and now today it's a thriving market that's in a very remote area, linking part of Isiolo County with Laikipia and Samburu. And the community members in that area are now able, through the access of technology, in this case the mobile peace and security has changed, so they're able to have markets on a more regular basis. More traders and market actors from across parts of Kenya are able to access that market and bring commodity in as well as take commodity out.
And so you don't have to carry cash.
And you don't have to carry cash. And so we're seeing large incomes increase, access to services, and larger stakeholder involvement across different sectors are able to come into that market, as it truly has become an economic hub for the Old Dinero communities that it services. And so I think it's a perfect example of how innovation and technology, bringing that closer to the people and being able to access it and utilize it to really have impact on people's lives here in Kenya, and we're pleased to be a part of that partnership.
Well, we've seen attempts to build on top of that secondary, so to say, service, which is now the weather-based index insurance that targets not just the crops but also the livestock, and this actually creates the resilience that we've talked about so much for farmers. Talk to us about the impact that this can have if it becomes broad-based and self-sustaining.
Index-based insurance in crops and livestock obviously creates an opportunity as one of those risk mitigation coping capacities that farmers and livestock producers can buy with livestock insurance. When times of crisis, then there's actual payouts to incentivize them to either sell early, which I think is another one of those key strategies that we want to see in place, as well as if there is a loss of commodity, they're able to receive a proportion of what that income loss would have been. And so it's really buying insurance to save livelihood gains throughout the time frame. And so we're seeing it obviously in Kenya. There's both in livestock, these types of insurance schemes are available both in the crops and in livestock sector. The adoption rate is, I think, a little bit slower than we would like, but I think it's because sometimes it's information and access to information and how the payouts and how the system works. And so I think one of the things we can do together through partnerships is ensure that the information is available on the insurance schemes and how they work, and how farmers and livestock keepers can get access to the information so they can subscribe.
I want to bring you in at that point, Margaret, and the fact has been that even as you drive the gains in terms of the livelihoods, in terms of the health, the aspects of resilience, commercialization, and creating running businesses then becomes really critical. Do you think that that sort of insurance, and at this rate, I know they had tried parametric where they bring it down to the farm, to the household level, and they'd count your goats and cows and say one cow, 5 goats, that is 1 unit of insurance, and that sort of thing. Has it been tough to get people to sort of think through, accept these sorts of things?
Like Jennifer has said, when it comes to insurance, and I think also this is basically even for Kenya. Let's not just talk about even for that area. Really Our penetration when it comes to insurance is it's one thing, but there are opportunities, and I'm happy that even there is also insurance that is also tailored to what is also acceptable to the people. For example, you'll find takaful, which is also acceptable to the Muslim community. So slowly by slowly, I think this is something that will continue gaining traction, having more people, buying into insurance.
Yes.
Because also, I think traditionally there has been a lot of mistrust, but I think as more and more people get into it and people actually see that have actually been paid out, also more people get interested in getting into it. And the fact that also we are working a lot with different groups, like with organized, like women groups or farmer groups or those kind of groups, that also helps in terms of the penetration. And within these groups, they are also able to kind of aggregate their resources through savings, through lending to each other, and that also helps in bringing in that kind of support to each other. Yeah.
Jennifer, let's talk about specialization and creation of different roles along the value chain, especially for the youth, and how technology plays a role in that space. With access to the internet, people can tell the price of a crop, the price of beef, livestock on the hoof in the market, empowering them when it comes to selling and offtake. But you then, of course, usually find that the challenges are these places tend to be quite remote. So they often have to rely on some sorts of brokers and aggregators and that sort of thing. Even with the cooperatives and that sort of thing in place, what are the roles that we then have to start to create in these value chains that the youth can play a role in, that then bring these people closer to the markets, create much more market information and reduce asymmetry?
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time, I think, in youth and entrepreneurship. We were just talking, Margaret and I were talking before we arrived at the studio about a young woman in Marsabit on the shore of Lake Turkana, who has brought innovation and found a niche opportunity of turning fish waste into a commodity of omega-3 into fish oil. And so she's used the internet to identify this need that the fish oil has a demand and a market here in Kenya. And she's then figured out there's a byproduct that's going to waste and not being productive. And she's now brought in her business model of turning that waste into a productive commodity that she can earn a livelihood from. And so I think the youth have wonderful skills and abilities to really tap into opportunities through their looking through the internet, surfing and identifying niche markets and then applying it in their culture and their context to make it a unique opportunity for value addition and a livelihood opportunity that 5 years ago none of us would have thought was possible on the shores of Lake Turkana in Marsabit. And so we had great opportunity to talk about that and how she's advancing and marketing that. Really
interesting. So we're almost at the end of our show, ladies. I want to give you about a minute and a half each to talk about anything that you feel might be important that we might not have touched on. Let's start off with you, Margaret.
I think maybe for me what I would say is that there is a lot of potential in the north, but also for us to be able to tap into this potential, there also has to be a lot of collaborative effort, not just among the development partners, but also with the government and also with these communities. And if we harness all our resources together, we can actually transform a lot of lives. We can transform the livelihoods. There is also a lot of potential in the livestock, just even in the livestock industry itself, apart also from these other areas. So for me, my appeal and also what I'm looking forward to is also for all of us to tap into some of these opportunities and support these communities to diversify their livelihoods and increase their resilience.
Broad-based activity by partners. Jennifer.
Yes, and U.S. government through the U.S. Agency for International Development, we've been able to partner with Kenyans over the last 60 years. And I think that's a critical point is partnership. I think together, collectively, we can work towards bringing together this collective base to change opportunities that exist in northern Kenya and some of these borderland areas to really allow them to drive their development and have prosperous lives. And it's just been truly remarkable, I think, through the initiatives we've seen. And I think it's critical to remember there's multiple stakeholders that need to be at the table and allow all voices to be at that table, whether it's government, counties, communities, private sector, youth, women. And through those collective voices, I think we truly can drive prosperous opportunities for all in Kenya.
Indeed, a really interesting conversation there, ladies. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Peter.
Asante. Now, of course, on that note, is Bob, we want to bring it to a close here on this edition of Farm Kenya. Of course, the conversation today has been around the borderlands, the arid and semi-arid lands, not just here in Kenya, but across East Africa and other parts of the world, which face almost similar circumstances, almost similar challenges. But of course, noting that there are unique solutions to unique challenges, and these have to be participatory and involving the locals and other stakeholders. That, of course, in all of our conversation today. My name is Peter Wakaba. It has been a blast having you here. Kwaheri ya kuonana.